He picked out his tie 3 weeks before the party. That's the thing I keep coming back to. My son, he was 7, almost 8, and he had never cared about a single piece of clothing in his entire life. The kid wore the same 2 pairs of jeans on rotation from September to June without complaint. But he walked into the men's warehouse with my dad one Saturday afternoon, stood in front of the display wall for about 4 minutes, and pointed to a navy clip-on with small gold anchors on it. He said, very seriously, that it was the right one. My dad bought it on the spot. Oliver had been talking about my brother's graduation party since Christmas. That's 6 months. 6 months of a 7-year-old holding on to something the way kids do. Completely, without irony, without the self-protection adults learn. My brother was finishing his MBA, and our family had rented out the back room of a restaurant we'd been going to, since my parents were dating. There was going to be a slideshow. There was going to be a cake that said, "The future's bright" in gold letters. Oliver was going to stand up at the kids' table and clink his glass of apple juice and give a toast he had been practicing in the bathroom mirror. He told me the words once, in the car, and I had to stare very hard at the road ahead so I didn't cry. "I'm so proud of my uncle," he'd said. "He worked really hard and now he's really smart." The end. He'd also added a small bow. The tie went on the top shelf of his closet in the original plastic sleeve, next to a Lego set he was saving for a special occasion. He checked on it, I think, more than he'd ever check on the Legos. I was the one who found out, and I want to be clear about the order of things, because the order matters. I found out from my mother, not from my brother. Not from his girlfriend, who will become important in a moment, but from my mother, who called me on a Tuesday evening while I was making dinner and said, without preamble, "I just want you to know the venue changed. It's at Greta's parents' house now. Outdoor thing. Greta's my brother's girlfriend. They had been together for about 2 years. She is not a bad person, I want to say that. She is not the villain of this. She is someone who made a choice, and the people around her let her make it, and that's a different thing." Okay, said. "When did that happen?" "Last week," my mother said. "Last week," I repeated. "Greta's mother offered the backyard, and your brother thought it made more sense." I asked what happened to the reservation. My mother said they'd canceled it. I asked who was going to be there. She gave me a number, 40 people, maybe 45. Then she said, very casually, the way she says things she knows are not casual at all, "Greta's niece is going to do the toast." I set down the wooden spoon I was holding. "Greta's niece. She's 8, my mother said. Greta thought it would be sweet. A child's perspective." I stood in my kitchen for a moment, watching the sauce start to bubble at the edges of the pot. "Oliver has been practicing a toast," I said. "I know. For months. I know, sweetheart. Does my brother know that?" There was a pause that told me everything I needed to know about what conversations had and hadn't happened in the weeks since this decision was made. "I'm sure it'll work out," my mother said. She did not say that Oliver would still give his toast. She did not say that there would be 2 children giving toasts, which was the most obvious solution in the world, and which I did not think of until later, when I was lying in bed at 11 o'clock, replaying the phone call, and wanting to put my fist through the wall. She said it would work out, which is my mother's way of saying, "Please don't make this harder than it already is," which is her way of saying, "I already know this is wrong, and I am not going to do anything about it." I didn't tell Oliver that night. I told myself I was waiting until I had more information. I called my brother 3 times over the next 2 days. He didn't pick up. He texted me back once, "Hey, sorry, slammed at work, will call soon," and then didn't call. I texted Greta and asked if we could talk, and she sent back a string of hearts and said, "Of course. So busy, run, but soon," with an exclamation point that made me want to scream. The party was on a Saturday. By Thursday, I still hadn't spoken to either of them. Oliver asked me on Thursday morning, while he was eating his cereal, if he should wear the tie to school the day before the party, just to practice. I said no, save it for the real thing. He said okay, and rinsed his bowl, and went upstairs to check on the tie. I called my dad that night. My dad and my mother have been divorced for 11 years. They are civil. The way people are civil when they have had a very hard time and come out the other side. Too tired to be anything else. He lives 20 minutes from me. He comes to Oliver's baseball games and sits in the folding chair I bring for him, and drinks coffee from a thermos. He is not a man who says a lot, but when he says something, it lands. I told him everything. The phone call with my mother, the unanswered calls to my brother, the toast, the tie. Greta's niece, who was 8 and presumably had not spent 6 months preparing anything. My dad was quiet for a long time. "Does Oliver know?" he asked. "No, when are you going to tell him?" "I don't know," I said. "I keep thinking my brother is going to call and fix it." My dad made a sound that was not quite a laugh. "When's the party?" "Saturday. I'll be there," he said. "You're already coming, Dad." "I know," he said. "I'll be there." I didn't fully understand what he meant. I thought he just meant he would be present, which felt like something. I didn't know he had already decided something. Friday came. My brother called. He called at 9:15 in the morning, which meant he had calculated that I would be at work and he could leave a voicemail. I was, in fact, at work, but I stepped into the hallway and answered anyway, because I had been waiting for this call for 5 days and I was not going to let him off with a voicemail. "Hey," he said. And then there was a pause and I could hear him recalibrating. He'd expected the machine. "Hi," I said. "I was just calling too. Tell me about the toast," I said. Another pause. "Mom talked to you." "Yes, so you know that Greta's niece. Greta thought it would be Callan has been practicing a toast for months, I said. My son's name is Callan. I had been saying Oliver in my head for some reason. Some nervous habit of misdirection, but his name is Callan. And saying it out loud to my brother felt important. Like I was making him real. Like I was refusing to let him be an abstract inconvenience. He picked out a tie. He talks about your party every week. He practiced his toast and he told it to me in the car and I almost had to pull over. Silence. I know, my brother said finally. You know, I know. And I'm sorry, it's Greta's day too, you know? It's about her family being part of things. And her niece is really excited, and Greta's mom has been so generous with the venue. And 2 kids can give toasts, I said. He didn't say anything. That's it, that's the whole solution. 2 kids, they're both 8. They can both walk up and clink their little glasses, and say their little speeches, and it would take 4 extra minutes, and everyone would love it. Why is that not what's happening? Greta feels like... What does Greta feel like? She feels like 2 kids would make it complicated. And honestly, I think one is cleaner, more polished. I let that sit there between us for a moment. More polished, I said. I know how it sounds. Does it sound like you chose your girlfriend's niece's spotlight over your actual nephew who has been practicing for 6 months? He said my name. Then he said that I was being unfair. Then he said that Callan would understand. He was a kid. Kids bounce back. Then he said that he hoped I could still come and be happy for him, because it was his day, and he had worked really hard. I said I would be there. I did not say I would be happy. I did not say anything else. I hung up and stood in the hallway at work for about 3 minutes, staring at the exit sign, doing the thing where you breathe through your nose and try to convince your body that you are fine. That night I told Callan. I had thought about how to say it. I had run through different versions in my head. Gentle, matter of fact, a little apologetic. I sat down with him after dinner, while he was drawing at the kitchen table, and I said there had been a change of plans at the party, that another little girl was also going to give a toast, and that this time it was going to be her turn. He stopped drawing. He didn't cry, that's the part that got me. He was 7 and he just stopped drawing and looked at his paper and said, "Oh," then he said, "Did I do something wrong?" I said no. I said absolutely not. I said it had nothing to do with him. He thought about it for a second and then said, "Is she a better talker than me?" I said no one was a better talker than him. He picked his pencil back up and started drawing again. I watched him for a while. He didn't say anything else. He just drew this focused, quiet concentration, and I sat there and felt something cold and steady settle in my chest. Later, when I was tucking him in, he asked if he still had to wear the tie. I said he could wear it if he wanted to. He said he'd think about it. He wore the tie. He came downstairs Saturday morning already dressed, the navy clip-on sitting perfectly straight on his collar, and he looked up at me like he was daring me to say something. I didn't say anything. I just told him he looked great, and he nodded once, very seriously, and went to get his shoes. My dad was already there when we arrived. Greta's parents have a large backyard. A real one, not a city postage stamps, but a proper suburban backyard with a flagstone patio and string lights and round tables with white cloths. It was a nice setup. Greta's mother had done something real with it. Under different circumstances, I would have been genuinely charmed. My dad was standing near the drink table, holding a glass of water, wearing his good blazer. He crouched down when he saw Callan and shook his hand very formally. "Sharp tie," he said. Callan said, "I picked it out." "I know," my dad said. "You've got good taste." Callan's face did something complicated. He said thank you and then went to look at the dessert table, which had a lot going on. My dad straightened up and looked at me. "How is he?" asked. "He wore the tie," I said. My dad nodded. "How are you?" "I'm fine," I said, which was true in the way that things can be technically true. My mother arrived 20 minutes later with my brother and Greta. Greta looked beautiful. She had on a yellow dress and her hair was up, and she was happy in the way that people are happy, when something is going exactly the way they planned. She hugged me warmly and said how much it meant to her that we were there. I said of course. My brother hugged me and said my name in that careful tone people use when they know they owe you something. Greta's niece. I learned her name was Brinley. Arrived with Greta's sister around noon. She was a confident kid, talked adults easily, wore a dress with a sash. She found Callan at the dessert table and they ended up talking about something. I could see them from across the patio. Callan gesturing, Brinley laughing. They were fine. Kids are so often fine in a way that breaks your heart. The party moved along. There was food. There was music from a speaker someone had set up near the garden. My brother made his way around the tables, accepting congratulations, looking genuinely happy, and I watched him and felt the complicated thing you feel when you love someone, and are also furious at them. The toast started after lunch. Greta's father went first. Then my mother, who said lovely things about my brother that were entirely true. Then a friend of his from the program, who was funny and got everyone laughing. Then Greta's sister brought Brinley up to the little microphone stand they'd set up. Brinley was good. She was genuinely good. She had clearly prepared. She talked about how her aunt always told her that working hard was how you showed love, and how her uncle had shown a lot of love, and it was sweet and polished, and the adults made appreciative sounds. When she was done, everyone clapped, and she gave a little curtsy that was absolutely adorable, and I clapped too, because what else do you do? Callan was sitting next to me. He clapped. He watched the whole thing with an expression I couldn't fully read, and then he put his hands in his lap and looked at the tablecloth. I put my hand over his, and then my dad stood up. He wasn't called on. There was no signal. He just stood up from his chair, unhurried, the way he does everything, and picked up his glass of water, and the people nearest to him got quiet, and then the quiet spread outward until the whole table was watching him. My brother looked over, surprised. Greta looked over. My mother looked at her water glass. My dad said he wanted to say a few words about his son. He talked about my brother for a minute, the work, the sacrifice, what it means to finish something hard. He said the right things, the things that were true. People nodded. My brother looked moved, the way you do when your father praises you. And then my dad said he also wanted to say something about his grandson. He looked at Callan. He said that some people in this family had been given a role, and then had that role taken away before they could do it, and that he thought that was worth naming out loud, because that's what you do when something isn't right. You name it. You don't let it sit there pretending to be normal. The patio got very quiet. He said that his grandson had prepared a toast for months, that he had practiced it, that he had picked out a tie, that he was 7 years old, and he understood something about showing up and keeping your word, and taking things seriously, that some of the adults at this party might want to think about. My brother's face had gone still. My mother was looking at the table. Greta's hand had stopped moving, mid-reach for her glass. My dad said, Callan, do you want to give your toast now? And my son, my 7-year-old in his navy tie with the gold anchors, looked up at my dad and then looked at me, and I gave him the smallest nod I had. He stood up. He picked up his apple juice. He said, I'm really proud of my uncle. He worked really hard for a really long time, and that means he's really brave, and also really smart now, so. He paused, that's it. Then he sat back down. There was a beat. One of those moments where you can feel the room deciding what to do. And then my dad started clapping. Slow and deliberate, and a few other people joined in. And then more. And someone across the patio whistled. And Callan's ears went red in the way they do when he's embarrassed and trying not to smile. My brother was clapping too. He was looking at his plate while he clapped, but he was clapping. The party continued. The cake came out. People drifted into smaller conversations, the way they do at the end of a meal. I found myself standing near the dessert table when my brother came over. He didn't say a lot. He said, Dad didn't have to do that. I said, yes he did. He was quiet for a minute. Then he said, I should have figured out the two tostate thing. I said yes, he should have. He said he was going to talk to Callan. I said okay. I watched my brother walk across the patio and crouch down next to my son, who was eating a piece of cake with the focus of someone performing surgery. They talked for a few minutes. I couldn't hear what they said. At the end of it, my brother ruffled Callan's hair, and Callan said something that made my brother laugh, a real laugh, surprised out of him. I don't know what was said. I didn't ask. Some things are allowed to stay between them. My dad found me by the car as people were starting to leave. Thank you, I said. He shrugged, in the way he shrugs. Somebody had to. I was going to let it go. I know, he said. You were being gracious. You weren't. No, he agreed without any apology. I hugged him for longer than usual, which is not something we do typically. He patted my back twice and stepped back and cleared his throat, and said he was going to get his umbrella from the table. On the way home, Callan fell asleep in his car seat about 10 minutes into the drive. The way kids do. Completely, immediately, like a light switch. I drove through the suburban streets with the radio low, and I thought about the toast he'd practiced in the bathroom mirror. And I thought about my dad standing up in a backyard, full of people who were all very carefully not looking at each other, and I thought about my brother crouching down with real apology in his eyes. The tie was a little crooked by then. The right half had come loose the way clip-ons do. I fixed it at a red light. He didn't wake up. We drove the rest of the way home in the early evening, the sun going orange over the roof lines, and I kept one hand on the wheel and one eye on the mirror, watching my son sleep in his good clothes with his good tie and his face completely at peace. And I thought, he showed up. He wore the tie and he showed up, and he gave the toast, and he sat back down with his head high. I don't know what he'll remember about that day. I know what I'll remember.